And we are live. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome if you are new. So, I've been reading episodes of a story I'm writing. I'm reading as I make progress with the story. I read it on this channel. It's good practice for me to hear my own story read back to me. So that's part of the reason I'm doing it. Eventually, I'll publish the whole thing somewhere, and you all can take it in its final form. One of the premises of the story, though, is that the entire breakdown that the journal captures in sequential order is initiated by an interruption in the oil supply globally, and not even globally, just an interruption in the oil supply. And the way that happens in the story is not outlined in any great detail because it kind of doesn't matter. It matters that it happened, but it doesn't matter how it happened. But the way it happens in the story is I have Iran and Saudi Arabia taking turns destroying each other's oil export capability. They both have oil terminals on the Persian Gulf, and they both have the ability, and Iran has actually done this, to impact each other's harbors and the oil refineries and whatnot around the harbor. So that's not even fiction. That's actually happened. But in the book, they go at each other in a big way and take each other's oil offline. But the point of the story is that it doesn't take much, actually, to bring down the global economy that's dependent on oil. Because the global economy isn't just dependent on oil, meaning there is oil in the ground, there is infrastructure to pump it, there's ways to transport it, there's ways to refine it. Yes, that's all necessary. But the global economy is also dependent on the oil story having no hiccups of any kind. And you can look at our recent history about what happens if, there's a war that breaks out or something like that. And the price of oil usually spikes, goes over a terrible threshold, $200 a barrel or something like that. And then, of course, then it comes down. What the cooler heads prevailed, or however you want to say it. So in the story, the problem with that narrative in the story is that the impacts to Iranian and Saudi Arabian oil infrastructure are significant and essentially, for practical purposes, permanent. And what then happens globally is that the entire house of cards just falls down. The price of oil goes up rapidly. The availability of oil doesn't change much. They're big providers, and they've got a big story about how much oil they have and how much confidence that gives the world in the availability of oil and the continuity of oil and fuel deliveries. But they're significant, but they're not the entire story, right? And yet, I think we could all agree this isn't even fiction. If the Saudis and the Iranians both, blew up each other's oil infrastructure, then that would be kind of the end of the story, because the price of oil would spike really high. There would be problems. People couldn't access the fuels anymore. Maybe the U.S. government or maybe international organizations could step in and say, okay, we're going to set the price of oil to whatever. And maybe that would work in the marketplace, but maybe it wouldn't, or maybe it doesn't happen quickly enough. Maybe they dither, and a month later, it's too late. But something can happen to the price of oil. Something can happen to the spot market availability of oil. And the panic sets in, the panic buying, the panic selling, and the entire agreement that we can all go forward holding hands and singing Kumbaya suddenly comes crashing down. I think that that's entirely feasible. That narrative is by no means out there. And in fact, it's sufficiently feasible that's how I start the book. I just start the book saying, yep, they go to war with each other, and the oil capacity of the Persian Gulf drops to close to zero, and the world goes into a panic, a tailspin, and the price of oil goes through the roof, $1,000 a barrel, and availability crashes. Companies that are supposed to be buying oil can't buy oil. If they're not buying oil, they're not refining it. If they're not refining it, then there's a panic. There's panic buying. Maybe the governments confiscate all the refinery outputs for their own uses, in particular for defense and for war. And the surface stations dry up like within a couple of weeks or part of a month. So that's the scenario of the story. Now, the reason I'm bringing all this up, spoilers, no, the oil capacity does not return. The reason I'm bringing it up is because something is happening right now in the world. Today is Wednesday, April 17th. 17th? Yes, it is. April 17th. And, a couple of days ago, basically hostilities broke out in the Middle East between Iran and Israel. Again, Iran is a major oil producer. Israel is actually, most people don't know this, a major natural gas producer. They have platforms in the Eastern Mediterranean in their exclusive economic zone, and they have developed those, and they are burning natural gas for whatever, mostly energy production. They need a lot of energy because they do a lot of seawater desalinization to generate fresh water, which is highly energy intensive, but they don't have a choice. They have to do that. So they're really glad to find the natural gas because they use a lot of it internally, domestically for fresh water production. But they also sell a lot of it. So there's, we have two energy providers that are really, going at each other, and this could go south very badly. Also, as in my story, Iran may take this opportunity to damage Saudi Arabia's oil capacity at the same time that they're attacking Israel, because Saudi Arabia and Israel are sort of quasi-allies. And so would punish Saudi Arabia by blowing up their oil fields. And then, this is especially true if the Israelis in their strike back on Iran due to their recent attack, but that's news. That's not even fiction. That's just news. They may strike the oil fields. Now, of course, the Biden administration wouldn't like that. The Europeans, EU wouldn't like that. What are you doing? You're messing with oil. But hey, the Israelis could do that. They could say, yeah, we're going to hit something that's not a civilian target. We think that the Iranians are raising money from their oil sales, and they're using that money to pay Hezbollah and Hamas to attack us. They're paying the Houthis in Yemen to attack us and sink shipping, and there's piracy going on the open seas. That's all being paid for by Iran using oil revenue. So we're not going to strike any civilian targets the way Iran does. We're going to strike military targets. That includes the oil field. So right now, the Israelis are thinking about what they're going to do. And who knows? Who knows what they're going to do? But hitting the oil fields is certainly on the table, right? So let's say they do that, and let's say the Iranians then hit the Saudi oil fields, and also at the same time, the Hezbollah hit the Israeli gas fields, and things just spiral out of control. So it's funny that I'm writing this story and reading it here. I'm up to 3 episodes on this channel. It's just interesting that that's what's happening. And one of the reasons why I wrote the story is because I kind of sensed that we're going into a period of instability that could result in a story like the one I'm writing, right? I'm doing speculative fiction. That's really all I write, is speculative fiction. So here we are, right? I'm kind of writing the story of what happens at the same time that it's kind of happening. So that's interesting. What is that? Life catching up with art, right? Art becoming real life, something like that. So I want everyone to think about this. Everyone who watches my videos and listens overall to what I'm doing here, you need to start thinking about life without oil. Now, that doesn't mean there's no oil anywhere. It just means that your access to oil products like gasoline and diesel becomes eroded, compromised. How does that happen? Well, I guess I wrote the book on that, but I'm going to explain that here in a more focused way, because really the story doesn't discuss it much. It just says, this is what happened. So here's the part I left out, which maybe I should even include as like an appendix, right? Like a bonus material. Here's how it happened as it plays out in real life. So here's what happened, and here's what's likely to happen to us, and why you are going to find yourself in trouble with regards to your dependency on fossil fuels. And one of the things I say on this channel a lot, outside of my fiction, just my general message is you should be getting off of fossil fuels. You should be figuring that out. You can't change the situation in the Middle East. You can't change global heating. You can't change anything. Is this my wife? I will take this. Hello. Hi. Yes. Yes, I'm doing a video. Is this important? I guess it wasn't important. When she's out, I kind of like to answer the phone. So here's how it happens. Here's how it happens. It's kind of like what I've outlined in my fiction, but here's how it happens. Instability in the global supply chain. Let me try that again. Instability in the global supply chains is what we are talking about. The global industrialized civilization, global economy, it's what we call a JIT economy. Everything's JIT, just in time. And that's literally how it works. There are very few warehouses where materials are accumulated. There are very few places where oil and gasoline are stored up in drums or barrels or towers or whatever. Everything is, get the materials in, do the minimum amount of processing, put a stamp on it, and send it right back out. There's no storage, because storage is sunk cost. The storage facilities, the material in storage, and the accountants are constantly looking at throughput. We have to keep things moving, because if you're storing a widget in your warehouse for a month, you have to write it down. If in next quarter it didn't sell, so you have to keep things moving. And it's the same thing with energy products. Also, there's constantly new things coming in, and people like something this month and they don't like it next month. So get it in this month, sell it this month while people are buying it. If they want more, we'll get more in. We'll sell it this month. So there's no storage for anything, and energy is no different. We do have what's called here in the U.S. is called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, SPR, and it's a government program. They store crude oil and maybe distillates like diesel, but I think it's mostly crude oil in the ground, in salt domes, which is where the oil came from in the first place. So pumping the oil back into a salt dome is perfectly acceptable. That's where it was in the first place. So the U.S. buys crude oil on the open market. Maybe they wait for the price to go down or whatever. Then they pump it into the ground, and that's the SPR. The SPR could be a really good thing to have right about now, especially with things being unsettled in the Middle East due to the war between Iran and Israel. So, but Joe Biden has been pulling down the SPR. He's been taking oil out of this SPR, putting it on the open market so that the U.S. can be can have some influence on the price of crude oil, because the price of crude oil, to some extent, to a large extent actually, feeds into inflation. If oil and oil products become expensive, then that cost gets passed on to the consumer. That's just how it works. So you don't want, when you're fighting inflation, you don't want the price of crude oil, and therefore gasoline and diesel and jet fuel and whatever, to go up, because that increases inflation. In fact, it's possible, in fact, it's likely, I believe, that a lot of our inflation we're seeing right now is not the usual consumer inflation. Wow, I have so much money, I'm just going to buy everything in sight, and the price goes up. A lot of our inflation right now is due to the cost of energy. And it's not just oil, it's also electricity. Our utility bills around here are going up at a pretty steady cadence. Okay, why are they going up? I don't know. I don't monitor that sector at all. But that's the story. The prices of energy are going up. The price of crude oil is going up. The price of gasoline never been higher. I don't buy much of it, but I go by the service stations, and here in California, it's ratcheted up around $5 a gallon. That's a lot. I don't think it'll ever go down from there, but it could easily and probably will go up. So what does that do? The price of goods also increases in like manner, because energy, electricity, and oil products are feedstock for the creation of any kind of product that's on the shelf. Certainly the transportation part, and Panera Bread or whatever, they have to hire employees. The employees get paid more suddenly because the cost of living is going up, and it ratchets back into the price of a bowl of soup at Panera Bread, and so on. So when you have energy shocks and the energy is still available, but the price is not really affordable, or people just stop buying it, or they stop doing things that require energy, well, then your economy can start to stumble. And if your economy is already just in time, everything is moving in and moving out, and it's just constant motion, well, and you get a hiccup in there, you could get problems in the global economy. So the point of the story is it doesn't take much to set that off, because a lot of the price of things is just sentiment. If there's an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane, what do people do? They go to the store and they empty the shelves. That's sentiment. That's not. Oh no, I just got a tweet that says the stores are going to run out of toilet paper. No, that's just you think there's going to be a problem with toilet paper, and you can't imagine going around all day not wiping your butt. So you storm out to Walmart and buy all the toilet paper and come out with $200 worth of toilet paper. That's sentiment. People just panic, right? People panic. So if we start having problems with our oil supply, then people who would normally just get on a plane and fly to, wherever and go to Disneyland, they might not do that. They'll just stop doing that. And if the oil shocks or the fuel shocks or the price shocks or the whatever shocks continue, then sentiment is such that, okay, I'm not doing things anymore like I used to. I'm not going to go to Starbucks and get a latte. I'm just going to make coffee at home, and so on. And since everything in the economy is just in time, and it's just being held up by sentiment, really. How does Walmart know to get more toilet paper? Because the shelves are getting empty, but they don't know there's going to be a run on toilet paper. So all of a sudden, the shelves are bare on toilet paper, and Walmart doesn't have any coming in tomorrow afternoon because, well, they might have some coming in, but they don't have enough to fill the shelves, right? And they know that as soon as they do, people are going to clear the shelves again. So they can't anticipate sentiment. They can anticipate daily use. Maybe they sell, 100 units of toilet paper a day, and they weren't ready to sell 1,000 units of toilet paper a day. And they could never be ready for that because their own supply chain is predicated on the average store sells an average of 100 units of toilet paper a day. And that supply chain decision, which is calculated on an average, but calculated every single day, that goes back all the way back to whoever makes the toilet paper, right? Somewhere up in British Columbia, where they're cutting down virgin forests and they're taking the pulp and they're processing it into paper. And some of that paper is toilet paper. That's a long thing. And somewhere out there's a guy out there with a chainsaw cutting down a tree. And so what are you going to do when people start clearing the shelves of toilet paper at Walmart? You're going to go all the way up the supply chain to the guy with the chainsaw and tell him, hey, Bucky, cut down more trees. Walmart's running out of toilet paper. And he's going to be like, what? What are you talking about? I can't help you with that, okay? I'm just one guy with a chainsaw. What am I supposed to do? So it doesn't really work that we're going to go all the way back to the guy with a chainsaw, cut down more trees to make more pulp, to make more toilet paper, ship it to Walmart, and all of a sudden the shelves are full because of sentiment. And that whole supply chain, that whole JIT thing applies to everything, every single thing, including your electricity. The electricity that's being used to run this video right now on my end and on your end is delivered just in time. There are huge computer models that decide where to buy energy, how much to pay for it, what's it going to cost, how are we going to deliver it, and these equations are being solved every second based on demand. And if demand goes up or demand goes down, then they can be caught flat-footed. And my point is that right now we have this big kerfuffle going on in the Middle East between Iran and Israel. This is a first. I know that there's, in modern times, I know there was a 7-day war and a 6-day war and whatever else was going on in Israel, but that was kind of a long time ago. And now things have gotten much more developed. We are much more globally distributed in terms of our supply chains, and everything is just literally just in time. And now we have this major blow up in the Middle East. So what happens? Well, in the story, and I think in this story, which is more of a this is more journalism, what I'm doing right here, right? In terms of journalistic storytelling of how they're going to tell the story, is that there's a major oil shock in Iran and Saudi Arabia. It involves war. There's all this sentiment that gets completely reversed, and people start hoarding, countries and companies start hoarding their crude oil. They take it off the market. Maybe the Saudis stop selling oil because the tankers can't come and go to deliver the oil to the rest of the world. So they just kind of stop selling oil. Maybe they stop pumping oil, and they're going to wait for the war to be over. They could do that anytime they want to, right? And for that matter, tanker operators, whoever actually sails the ships and crews the ships, and of course insures the ships, they don't want to be in that area. They don't want to sail their $100 million tankers into the Persian Gulf to offload oil from the Saudi terminals. They don't want to be in there. They'll hang out. They'll hang out in the Indian Ocean and wait for the time when hostilities slow down. So all of a sudden, everybody just kind of making their own decisions. Everyone making their own decisions. They just kind of stop doing it, and no one knows that others are also making the same kind of decision. And these people aren't moving oil, and these people aren't shipping oil and pumping oil, and these people are blowing up oil terminals, and these other people are hoarding oil, and they're going to refill the SPR, and that takes oil away from the open market. And as the open market becomes depopulated, the supply of oil goes down, then the price goes up, and then everyone panics and they start hoarding even more, and they start buying up oil they can, and there's even less oil. And the whole agreement that let's just go on, folks, like everything is fine, ends up with the shelves at Walmart being emptied of their toilet paper. Because that's how this is now. Everything is tied together. Everything works together. All the gears mesh all the time. And everything that happens is happening just in time. And it makes all these assumptions about regularity and predictability, and it goes along like this for 30 years, 40 years, and then one day it just stops going on that way. And there's whole generations of people, the age of my son and daughter, and maybe even a little older. There's an entire generation of people that have never known supply chain interruptions. The little tiny bit we experienced during the COVID-19 lockdowns was pretty scary. That was a wake-up call for a lot of people. And to hear the economists talk about it, we haven't really figured that part out yet. We haven't even really straightened out our supply chains after that. And now we're probably going to get to experience it. I think we are. So what happens? What happens when the availability of oil crashes due to hoarding and price problems and just availability? No one wants to step out in the middle of a bullet, right? They all kind of hang back. What happens when the price goes up? What happens when the availability goes down? You go to the service station and they have those little bags over the pumps, that say, out of service or out of oil or whatever. And then what are you going to do? Well, you're going to drive all around the county trying to find oil. Well, there's 4,000 people doing the same thing you are. And wow. So where does that all go? We need constant 24/7 inputs of fossil fuels. And we're about to find out. I think we're about to find out what happens when that just doesn't work. That's why Joe Biden is really worried about Israel attacking Iran in a kind of a tit for tat sort of thing, or the multiple exchanges between those two players, and then pulling in the Saudis and pulling in the Jordanians and pulling in the Azerbaijanis or whoever else, and having a regional war that impacts the availability of fuel. I think Joe Biden is shaking in his boots. For one thing, he's trying to be reelected, and his possibilities are not that great. And also, it's just going to implode the global economy. So we got lots, there are personal problems and there are also shared problems. And, the leaders of the world are trying to put a lid on this. They're trying to get everyone to behave. And that's because they know what happens if there's any hiccup with this JIT economy. Any hiccups at all, and the whole house of cards will come down. It hasn't done that in 40 years, but that doesn't mean it couldn't do it now. And if anything, we are more near, even though we have this global heating thing and this uh, climate change and the carbon dioxide emissions and all this stuff is true. It's all happening. Nevertheless, we keep digging in deeper and deeper and deeper into fossil fuel dependency. Fossil fuel dependency. We're digging deeper all the time. And how is that supposed to work out? How is that actually going to work? And and people become complacent, and it's normalcy bias. I understand. We're just going through our day, and the things that are normal are just normal, right? Why would there ever be a problem at the service station? Every day I've been back there, I belly up to the service station. I fill my 17-gallon SUV, and I drive away with a tank full of fuel. And I never think about what'll happen if that ever becomes too expensive, and it could just be too expensive. By the way, what if the price of a barrel of oil goes up to $300 or $400 a barrel, and then translates to the service stations, and your gas is now $10 a gallon? What happens? $10 a gallon. What happens? Well, I guess we're going to find out, because that's vulnerability. A lot of people can't stand to pay $5. And what if it goes to 10? Well, they won't allow it. Oh, well, what if they don't have a choice? I suppose Joe Biden could pump out the strategic petroleum reserve more than he already has, and send that crude oil to our processing plants, and then require them, because it's not law what they do with that oil. They can do whatever they want with it. They are private corporations, but he could require by law, right, some administrative executive signature, or maybe get Congress to pass a law that oil from the SPR must go into the refineries in the U.S., and those refinery output must go into the U.S. fuel supply. And maybe Congress could do that, but I bet they won't, or they won't do it in time. So he's just going to pump down the SPR, throw it onto the open market, and the price of a barrel of oil goes from $400 a barrel to $392, right, as a result of emptying the SPR. And what's that do to the price of a gallon of gas? Nothing really. And so we have no control, really. I mean, essentially, we don't. We can try to coerce it and, prod it in one direction or another, but we have no control. There's no control over this. A lot of that has to do with capitalism. All the oil that the U.S. produces goes onto the open market, the global market. That's how it works. That sounds dumb, but that's how it works. Our oil is not our oil. Our oil from the fracking and the whatever, the Permian and the Bakken and all these other things, our oil actually belongs to the oil companies. They sell oil to everybody. So that's just what they're going to do. And you empty the SPR and you put it on the open market, they're going to sell it to everybody. And who knows what happens to the price of a barrel of oil, except, of course, in the end, we don't have any of our own oil. It's not ours. It belongs to the oil majors. Most people don't know that. Keep our oil at home. Yeah, well, you don't own any oil, fella. You gave leases to the oil companies that belongs to them. And they're quite happy to try it out, the contract. See right here? It says on this contract right here. Excuse me. Let me read this. Yeah. See right there. Fine print. Not even fine print. It's just print. So, right along with the rest of it's contract law. You're going to sue us? You're going to take us to the Supreme Court? Yeah, well, we'll see you in a decade. We'll see you in a decade. If you're still in office and if people still care, we'll see you in a decade. Yeah, that's how it's going to be. And what happens when gasoline is $10 a gallon? Well, you'll buy it. That's what you'll do. You'll buy it. And then the price of food at Whole Foods goes up a commensurate amount. And then your latte goes up a commensurate amount. And then the price of daycare for your children goes up a commensurate amount. And pretty soon, you just can't afford your life anymore. Your sacred American way of life is just out of reach. It's out of reach. You thought all of this was sacred and eternal and blessed by God. And no, it wasn't. Nothing about it. It was all just in time, built on dependency of oil. And the oil had to be a certain price, and it had to be available on a certain contract. And there were futures, and there were oil exchanges, and there were all this stuff going on. And it was just all a dream. It's a fever dream that we've got this figured out. We don't have this figured out at all. All we have is dependency. In the end, that's all we have is dependency. So in my story, of course, our intrepid survivors, if you want to call them that, they have to figure out real quick, really fast, how to get off of fossil fuels because they're just not available at the price that they can afford. And they're scrambling around. What are they dealing with? Well, first they're angry, and then they want the government to do something, and then there's this, and then there's that, and then pretty quick they realize that these stilts get knocked out from under the local economy, and people who are not restrained by fair play start taking what they don't have. They take food, they take the toilet paper from the shelves at Walmart, and they take your car, and if you get in the way, they take your life because they're desperate to survive, and they're more desperate than you are, or they figured it out before you did. And when they came out looking for things, they brought their guns. Now, in this story, it doesn't turn into a running gun battle, although I'm sure in some cities it would turn into a running gun battle. Absolutely. Everyone got their gun. Everyone gets their gun out. Everyone's running around trying to get the things they think they're entitled to, and they get them at gunpoint. And it's just a running gun battle. But in this story, it isn't. I don't think it's necessary. Pretty quick, this whole idea of running around trying to get what you think you're entitled to comes to a halt. And why is that? Because one of the things you can't get is gasoline for your truck. You can't bring your guys together and all go out and raid the Walmart and empty the shelves and get all the cosmetics and whatever. You're going to resell this stuff on eBay? What are you talking about? The global economy is imploding. You're not selling fuck all on eBay, okay? You'd be lucky if you have an internet connection. Least of all, selling your pilfered cosmetics on eBay. Give me a break, but that's how it's going to be. People are going to think, hey, here's an opportunity to steal a bunch of 70-inch TVs and sell them on eBay. Well, you're going to end up with a yard full of 70-inch TVs, and there is no eBay. That's what's really going to happen. But people can't think that far ahead because they don't understand. They think it's all going to be normal. And all I have to do is get me and my buddies together with a bunch of guns and clubs and whatever. We go steal a bunch of 70-inch TVs and sell them on eBay, and we all get rich. That's all they can think. Because they can't think, because they're chimps, right? They just can't figure it out. They just, they can't. Normalcy bias, worse. They're morons. So yeah, people are going to go ahead thinking they got a handle on things. They're going to find out they don't have a handle on things. And then it becomes, well, I used to go to the market and get my food. More recently, I went to the market and stole my food at gunpoint. And now I go to the market and there's nothing on the shelves. Well, that was fun while it lasted. I felt like Rambo while it lasted. I felt like I was stud monkey at the county fair while it lasted. And now I got nothing. I got a gun and bullets, and I can't go rob anybody for food. Well, now what? Yeah, you were dependent on this JIT economy to bring your food to your store. And when you didn't have money and you didn't think anybody was looking, you had bullets to exchange for your food at the store. And then you went out there and the store was empty. And there were no employees. And, it's been ransacked and it's never coming back. That store will never have employees again. Everything's been broken. It's been set fire to. It's been vandalized. It's been burned down. That store is never coming back. It doesn't matter how many bullets you have or how wicked you and your friends are, and you're going to steal everything that you can't buy, and you're going to get yours, and you have a right, and they owe it to you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think, because it's just not going to happen. It doesn't happen. Because for you to do any of those things, you need gasoline and diesel. And it's not there. Because it blew up. Why? Because the Israelis decided they were going to go to war mano a mano with Iran, which as of right now is still in process. And they're going to take out the oil terminals. That's what happened. That's what happened to you. If I come back here 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, when we have this conversation again, and I'm going to be saying, see, that's what happened to you. The just-in-time economy and the just-in-time everything, including the toilet paper and the canned goods and the fresh produce from Mexico, it was all just a big mirage. And you thought that mirage was sacred and eternal, and God-given, and you're in the Constitution and freedoms and democracy. And no. Wasn't any of those things. It was just corporate decisions based on the availability of oil. Corporate decisions, not to store anything, not to have anything laid up in advance, not to have any fallback mechanism. Everything just in time. The economists love it. The bean counters love it. The auditors love it. Everything's just in time. There's no warehouse, nothing being stored, and nothing being stolen, and nothing being lost, because it's all just in time. It goes from Mexico to the pier to the truck to the store, and pretty much in 2 days. That's where we're at right now, and it's fragile. It can fall apart. So what are you supposed to do? One, you pay attention. Pay attention to what's going on in the world because it's getting interesting. Second thing, you need to start thinking in concrete terms about where you are vulnerable to fossil fuel dependency. I've said many times on this channel, I don't know how they're going to shut the fossil fuels off. I don't know if they're going to shut them off completely, but at some point they're going to become unavailable to the average Joe. All right, we are on the threshold of that right now. It's going to become unavailable or unaffordable or hard to locate or whatever euphemism you would like to use. It's going to be unavailable to the average Joe. And on that day, on that splendid, glorious day, when the fossil fuels end, okay, then finally we're trying to do something about our climate change. Well, we didn't do it because we wanted to. We did it because we had to. We stopped burning fossil fuels, right? And how does that translate into normal life? It translates into you go out in your front yard, you haven't been able to buy fossil fuels for 2 weeks, and you look around, and what do you see? How has the world changed in the 2 weeks since you haven't bought a gallon of gasoline? Here's how the world looks to you on that day when you finally realize that your access to fossil fuels, for whatever reason, has just been zeroed out. You're going to see no driving, no flying, no movement of goods, no movement of money, and no jobs. Because it's been 2 weeks, you haven't been to work. And you heard from one of your friends that in the time you didn't go to work, they actually shut down the company. Nobody's coming to work. Maybe we'll restart the company when this all gets sorted out. Well, maybe they never will. Maybe they're gone. Maybe the person who owns the company, has to give up. They pay their taxes that they owe, and they can't get supplies. And the suppliers are saying, we can't get our supplies to supply you with supplies. And it's looking bad. And the guy just shutters the shop, doesn't go back. And maybe in the meantime, he goes and finds something else to do. Maybe he leaves the county. Maybe he leaves the state. Maybe he decides to go live with his family and friends in Wyoming or something, right? And they're saying, oh, we've got lots of gasoline. We have our own tank on the property. Okay, I'm coming to hang out with you. And boom, he's gone. Maybe he never comes back. Maybe your job just evaporated. And if enough people's jobs evaporate, if enough companies just can't keep it together anymore because their supply chains have just fallen over, well, then everybody's unemployed. And what happens when everybody's unemployed? They stop spending money, right? So you lose your job, the money movement, the flow of money stops. And that means the stores don't sell products. And also the stores can't buy products because they don't have money. Why? Because no one's spending money. And so it's just this cascading thing of one domino knocking over another. And you're dependent on that. So you have an opportunity right now to start thinking about that and addressing that. And what does that mean? What that means for you, I don't know. If you're driving 40 miles to work to get your little token every day to buy food, clothing, and shelter, then I guess you're in big trouble. If you're self-employed, are you going to have any customers? If you're a wedding photographer and you get, $500 an hour or $1,000 an hour for wedding photography, what if people don't hire wedding photographers anymore because they can't afford it? Yeah, they're getting married, but they can't afford a big wedding with a wedding photographer. And that's, because they barely have money to scrape together, a wedding at all. And so you don't have any customers. You're self-employed. In theory, you're okay, but you're not because no one can afford your service. And maybe you start, doing wedding photography for $50 a wedding, right? Well, they're not spending any money on wedding photographers. They got a cousin that has a nice cell phone and they're going to clean the lens off with a cloth and they're going to do the wedding photography. That's how we do wedding photography when we've run out of oil. So if you're unemployed, too bad for you. You may not have any customers. Now what do? Do you own your own home? Okay. So how are you going to pay your mortgage? What happens when they say, yeah, you can't live here anymore because you haven't paid your mortgage? Well, maybe the government steps in and says, hey, you can't be throwing people out of their homes just because they're not paying their mortgage. The entire global economy has gone tits up. To leave them alone, let them live in their house. Okay, fine. Phew, I get to live in my house. Well, did they have a conversation with the utility company? Because you haven't paid your utility bill either. So they're going to come and they're going to turn off the electricity here and say, hey, what happened to my electricity? Well, we turned it off. Non-payment. Well, you can't do that to me. Yes, we can. Pay up. Pay up or shut up. Well, okay, fine. I get, and what else are they going to turn off? The water, the natural gas? I mean, you're going to be up shit's creek if if things go sideways in a big way, and if all these corporations just keep doing their thing robotically, turning off the electricity here and turning off the water there for non-payment, and doing this other thing, and not shipping food to Whole Foods because they haven't paid their bill, coon's age, and so what are you going to do? All of a sudden, you know, you got some mortgage relief because the U.S. government came down on the mortgage companies. That's fine. Uh, and presumably you don't have to pay your county taxes either, because that's there. They want their pound of flesh, but your electricity and water and your gas is turned off. Is this even habitat anymore without all that? What are you going to do? Are you going to attack the guy when he comes out with the lock? He's going to turn off your water and put the lock on there. What are you going to do with that guy? He's just doing his job. He's got a job. You don't. He's doing his job. You're going to hold that against him? What are you going to do? You got to start thinking about these things. Now, one of the things I like to say on these videos is everyone is going to have to make a decision on this one particular topic, which is where do you need to be and who do you need to be with? Because pretty soon getting there is going to be impossible. Impossible. Not difficult, not expensive, impossible. If you have to drive, 800 miles to move in with your parents, well, then you're not going to be able to do that. You'll be able to walk, but that's also virtually impossible. You probably die on the road. You'll probably be mugged, killed for your wedding ring. Where do you need to be and who do you need to be with? I would suggest you figure that out right now. Absolutely, before anything bad happens. When the shit hits the fan, you're going to want to be somewhere else. You're going to want to be with your family. You're going to want to be surrounded by friends. You want to be with people who are reliable and you have a good expectation will keep you on the island, take care of you, not throw you into the gutter because you're a renter or because you didn't make your house payment or something else. You need to be surrounded by people who are part of your support network. That's the very least you can do. Then you may want to find ways to cover the basics without fossil fuels. What are the basics? Right? Food, clothing, and shelter. Well, shelter, if you have a house, I guess you have a house. Even if you're not paying the mortgage, you still have the house. But someone who doesn't have a house may want your house. What are you going to do about that? And what clothing, probably not a problem. You've got clothing now that'll last you many, many years, especially if you patch it up once in a while. But what about food? Where's your food going to come from? You have to have food and water practically every day. Water certainly every day. And food regularly, right? Can you do anything about that? Well, with the water, maybe you could lay up water in barrels. Do you have barrels? Where are you going to put the water? What if the water just becomes intermittent and you just need to lay up water for a few days and then the water comes back and you need to lay up water for a few days? That means they didn't really turn it off and put a lock on it in front of your house. But for other reasons, supply chains being what they are, people's activities being what they are, people don't keep coming to the water companies, so things break and they don't want to go out and fix it because they're at home dealing with their families, or they left the county. Maybe someone just moved away, went to Montana to be with their grandparents, and now they're living in Montana and they're not going to go out and fix the water mains. They're not going to go out and fix the power pole when the lines go down or the transformer blows up. They're not going to drive gasoline to the service station. They're not going to deliver food to the Whole Foods or the Trader Joe's. They're just they're living in Wyoming now. So what happens when people leave your area? Because your area is fossil fuel dependent, they're going to go live someplace that isn't fossil fuel dependent because they saw the handwriting on the wall and you didn't, or you did and you couldn't do anything about it. So where are you at? Are people just going to leave, up sticks and go? And you're probably not one of those people. So if you're living in a city, you're going to be dealing with a lot of people whose life is falling apart. What are you going to do about that? Of course, that's the interesting story. And that's the story I'm writing in this book, story, novella, whatever it is that I'm writing, is I'm noodling over what people do. Yeah, the main event, there is even a part in the story where I say, yeah, there was a nuclear exchange in the Middle East or someplace else, but we don't really know where it was because, the news organization stopped reporting these things because it was too scary, and they were trying to cover up what was really happening and being largely successful in doing that. But they couldn't cover up the fact that oil was $1,000 a barrel and oil products weren't available anymore. They couldn't cover that up. You don't have to talk about the nuclear exchange between North and South Korea, but what can you say about the fact that the service stations are running out of fuel? There's not much you can say. It's just a fact on the ground. So in the end, we don't really know what happened in the nuclear war between the North and South Koreans and the Iranians and the Saudis. We don't really know because they didn't report it, and we don't really care. We're all still here, but we don't have gasoline, and we'll never stop talking about the day the gasoline ran out. That's a line in the story. We'll never forget the day that the gasoline dried up. And that's now. That's a thing. That story, not my story. My story is bad enough. That story is now in flight. We're just one significant missile barrage of Iran away from, okay, game on, right? Game on. We're just one missile barrage. It could be in 48 hours, 24 hours from now. We're one missile barrage, one airstrike against Iran away from that narrative, that story. Where do you want to be? And people are running around thinking, oh, well, nothing bad can happen. This is the United States of America. We pump our own oil. Yeah, we do. And we have allies. And what happens if the Europeans run out of oil even quicker than we do? Are we going to just leave our oil here in the U.S. For, fat people in SUVs to go get Cheetos at Walmart? Is that what we're going to do with our oil? Probably not. We're probably going to ship it to Europe because they're allies. We don't want them to be overrun by Russia. It becomes a political decision and not an economic decision. And political decisions generally, are foremost in politicians' minds. They're trying to avoid global war. They're trying to avoid invasion. They're trying to avoid, collapse of civilization. They don't really care what you pay for a gallon of gas. They don't care if you got your Cheetos at Costco. You're not high on their list, but you think you are. You think you are. You're about to find out that you're not. So what does that mean for you? Remember, when they turn off the fossil fuels, or if they become unavailable, or they become too expensive, or they become too strategic and they're given all to the military, or they become something else, on that day or shortly thereafter, what you will see in the world, ready yourself for this, what you will see in the world around you without constant inputs of fossil fuels will be a world that looks like this. No driving, no flying, no movement of goods, no movement of money, and no jobs. That's the world that you're going to see, because all of that stuff, all 5 of these things are dependent on constant inputs of fossil fuels at a certain price with no interruptions ever, 24/7. No interruptions, no hiccups, no slowdowns in deliveries, and no increase in the price. That's what driving, flying, and moving goods and all this other stuff is dependent upon. And without those conditions continuing unabated, uninterrupted, without all of that narrative stringing together and working every single day for every single person, every single time, every time they want gas, every time they turn on a light switch, every time, no matter who you are, where you are, it always works. So long, right up until it doesn't work, then you can make certain assumptions about your world. You can make assumptions about your world. At some point, you're just not going to be able to do that anymore. You will still make assumptions about your world, and you'll blame somebody, and you'll blame it on the Illuminati, and it's a conspiracy, and it's HARP, and it's the CIA, and it's all these other things, and it's all a bleak conspiracy. It's not going to matter. It ended. And while you were looking somewhere else, while you were storming the Capitol, or while you were arguing with your online friends about Donald Trump, whatever it was you were doing, you were looking over here, you were looking over there, and you weren't looking at the thing right in front of your nose the entire time. which is your dependency on fossil fuels. That's the thing that should have been right in front of your nose the whole time. You should be telling yourself every time you fill up that car with gasoline, you should be looking at the price of that gasoline and watching that fuel go into your tank. You should be thinking, man, if this ever stops, for a day, least of all a week, I'm up shit's creek. That's what you should be telling yourself. But you're not. Nobody is. Nobody on this planet is right now, as I'm saying this, or any time when I started this to the time I ended, nobody on this planet is looking at their dependency on fossil fuels and saying, wow, that isn't going to work out for me. Nobody's saying that right now. But as soon as the price and availability of fuel or the price and availability of crude oil becomes unhinged, then they're going to be, what they will be doing is running around, throwing their weight around, waving their AR-15s, demanding their freedom and demanding their justice. And you owe it to me, and I need this, and you can't take this away from me. And I'm going to shoot up the service station if I can't get what I want. Yeah, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. The only thing that's going to work is for you to look at that right straight in the eye and say, all right, that's my dependency. That may not work out. That's what you have to do. That's what all your friends have to do. That's what your family has to do. You have to all sit around the dinner table. You have to all get together with your friends on the back porch and say, well, boys and girls, we need to have a conversation. Because I need you not to freak out. You're my neighbors. I need you to not freak out when this goes sideways. I'm not going to freak out. I've given a lot of thought to it. And we could circle our wagons. We could pool our resources. We could engage we could create alliances. We could create the habitat that's missing in our lives right now, and not be so independent, not be so free, and not be so, overjoyed with, our dependency on fossil fuels. Instead, we could look it square in the eye, have an adult conversation about our dependency and how can we circle our wagons as adults and bring our families together and somehow create an environment where we can endure this when it's gone. It's just a conversation, folks. I'm just writing a story. My story is just a narrative. It's just a conversation. You could read it. You could read it with a friend. You could send an email link to a family member and say, hey, you better read this. This is the real deal. I think this guy's onto something. We need to start thinking about what we would do if that dependency ever jumped up and bit us in the butt, because it might. Because the Israelis are thinking about blowing up the oil terminals in Iran right now. April 17th, not even fiction. Not a fiction at all. The Biden administration is running around on the phone constantly talking to the Israelis. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't. I know you're going to do it. Don't do it, Benny. Don't. Yeah, that's what Biden's doing. Benjamin. Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Israelis, they don't want to hear your bullshit. Price of a gallon of gas, that's your big concern? The price of a barrel of crude oil, that's your concern? That we're going to do this now? You're going to tell me what to do with I'm under attack by nations all around me, and you're worried about the price of a barrel of oil? Yeah, I got this for you. Okay? Yeah, go fuck yourself, Joe Biden. Oh, good luck with the election. Let me know how that turned out for you. All right? I mean, that's the conversations they're having right now on April 17th. As I sit here, that's the conversation they're having. And I don't know how that works out. And if it works out this month, what about next month? And what about the month after that? Does this threat of interrupting your sacred and forever eternal access to fossil fuels, does that really go on? Hey, I haven't even mentioned global heating. Did you know we're supposed to be cutting back and essentially eliminating our consumption of fossil fuels? Did you know that? You should be thinking about that. The entire time I'm saying all this, I don't even have to mention the Paris Climate Accords. I just did. We're supposed to be ending our reliance on fossil fuels. Well, if we were to ever set out to do that, if we ever sat down in the Oval Office, sat down the cabinet's all there, and the major leaders of Congress are all there. We sit down in the Oval Office and say, okay, boys and girls, global heating, it's a thing. It sucks. You know that as well as I do. You want to go out and, pen an opinion piece in the New York Times that says you think it's a hoax from China. Fine, you go ahead and do that. You know as well as I do, you're not stupid. Okay, you're not completely stupid. You're somewhat stupid, but you're not completely stupid. And you know that it's real, and you know we're supposed to stop doing this. And so let's sit down here in the Oval Office. Let's sit down in the Congress and private chamber, and let's just have this discussion right now. Now we're going to do this. We are going to do this. We have to get ourselves off of fossil fuels. I want concrete, actionable recommendations right now. And blaming it on the Chinese is not an actionable recommendation. How do I get people off of fossil fuels? They could have that discussion tomorrow. In fact, they might even be having that discussion because they kind of know what I know, which is this whole thing is a house of cards. And the discussion might be Joe Biden is saying, wow, if the Israelis bomb the oil infrastructure in Iran to deprive them of revenue, then we're kind of up shit's creek, boys and girls. So what's our plan B? Because I've been on the phone with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli war cabinet, and I've been on the phone with Iran and with Putin and all the other assholes that are eyeball deep in this thing, and they're all wired up and fired up, and they're all going to do what they're going to do. They're going to bomb this and missile that, and whatever. I can't make headway with these people. Like they're a bunch of morons. Okay, so I can't make headway with these people. What are we going to do, boys and girls? I'm sitting you down here in the Oval Office. What are we going to do? Let's have this conversation. Let's just war game this right out. Right now, I'm Joe Biden, and I'm tired, and I've been on the phone all day, and I'm talking to assholes who don't want to talk sense, as far as I'm concerned. And now, what plan B? What's our plan B? Okay, scenario is a barrel of oil goes to $500 a barrel tomorrow afternoon. What's our plan B? So the SPR? Yeah, well, I kind of depleted that. So how about another plan? Because if there's regional war, then actually all the SPR, whatever's left in there, it goes to the military. So what's our other plan? Oh, and by the way, half of the oil that's being currently pumped out of the ground, fracking and whatever else, that goes to Europe. So, it all gets redirected into maintaining allies, maintaining military services, maintaining whatever we can of the global supply chain, maintaining agriculture and other things that are necessary. And the rest of it for gasoline and diesel and driving your fat ass to Starbucks for your morning latte? No, not so much. All right, let's talk about our plan B. What are we going to do if the Israelis do this? What are we going to do if oil goes to $500 a barrel? What are we going to do? Let's talk about this. They could be having that conversation right now. Joe Biden might have just had that conversation. Maybe just got off the phone with Benny Netanyahu and said, God damn you, click. All right, this isn't going to work. I tried my best, folks. It isn't going to work. And we got to sit down. We got to figure this out. Let's figure this out. We need legislation. We need to keep all of our oil at home. No, we have to send some of it to our European allies. Well, who cares about them? Well, we need to care about them because if they fall, then we're at war with Russia. Okay. Can't we just let them sit and spin? No. Think about the refugees. Just think about the refugee crisis of Europeans fleeing Europe, and the French and the Italians and even the British and the Germans and the Poles all fleeing to come to the North America. They're all going to end up on the East Coast. They're going to be piling out of ships on the East Coast, private yachts, the whole thing. It's going to be boat people. What are we going to do? That's the kind of conversations they could be having in the White House. Now, they're not having those conversations because they're morons. Politicians as a class are morons. They're greedy and they're stupid. They're stupid because they're greedy. Greed makes them look and act dumb. When you're greedy and you're focused on the one thing, the money, the power of the money, and did I mention money? Then it makes you do stupid things. You just sound and you act and you look stupid. Because people with obsessive compulsive disorders like that don't make sense. So no, they're not talking about what's going to happen when the Europeans, when Ukraine loses the war to Russia and the Europeans go to war with Russia and they don't have fossil fuels and they can't even run their economy anymore and the people are hungry and the tanks are lining up in Poland to fight the Russians. They're not going to talk about that. You think Joe Biden's going to talk about that? He's still obsessed about Donald Trump. Do you think Donald Trump is going to talk about that stuff? He's obsessed with himself. It's just not going to work. What are you going to do? Well, you better start having that conversation. And it starts with the understanding that on day one, just like in my book, day one. That's what it's called. Chapter one is called day one. Okay, on day one, you're going to see when you walk out in front of your house, you'll know it's day one for you, whatever day that is, when you go outside and look and you see no driving, no flying, no movement of goods, no movement of money, and you've lost your job. That's day one. That's day one. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden's doing. It doesn't matter what Donald Trump is doing. It doesn't matter what the Israelis did or why they did it or when they did it or how many times they're going to do it. Doesn't matter anymore. You just hit your own day one. All right, this is day one. God damn it. And you should ask yourself, am I where I need to be? Is this where I want to be on day one? Am I with the people I want to be with? Do I like my neighbors? Is my community secure? Okay, maybe that's true. Am I with the people I need to be with? I've got elder parents living in Connecticut. I'm worried about them. What am I going to do about them? I guess they're on their own. Is that okay? Are you okay with that? They're on their own. Do you have other siblings living in the area that can take care of your elderly parents? Or what about your kids in college? Your kid went off to college. Your kid is in college in the UK. Is that okay? Are you okay with that? Because flying back to the US and then flying around in the US to try and get home, that could be a non-thing. Could be just a non-thing. Maybe a ticket on a commercial jet across the North Atlantic costs $15,000 a seat. And your kid doesn't have that money, and you don't have that money either because you just lost your job. So your kid is stuck in the UK. For how long? Oh, I don't know, maybe forever, right? So where are you? And are you with the people you're supposed to be with? You can manage that right now. You can fix that. Possibly, maybe not. But you can think about it. Will you? I don't know. Will anybody? I don't know. Maybe. I think you're going to have a chance at some point because, real life is catching up to fiction, which means I should finish my stupid book. First world problems, right?